Hi everyone. So in today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit what it's like facing the question of leaving Islam. If you've been faced with this, questioning and you're a little bit now feeling like what is the most common reactions? So I know because I've had these discussions with some of my close friends and when you're faced with a lot of loopholes or little like things that are not making sense or first of all it's like a big defense, they don't even allow it, but like once they were like, okay, I can't really argue this, I'm not too sure, so before they get to that stage, it's always it's the first thing that you want to go beyond further is like, well, okay, then what else is there, what are my other options? So that's like the bigger psychology point that I think I want to point out is most people, they are afraid of actually just outright leaving Islam because then they're like, well, then what is the alternative? Like, what else do I have then? So I wanted to give you a little idea of what is actually like living in a Muslim mentality, Muslim household. It's a very big structure that is holding you actually for most people, for any religion, if they've grown up and they've really made it the center of their world, their whole life. That's how they basing their decisions. That's how they are really like planning their life. It's really around this big structure that they have in their mind, which is called Islam, right? For some people, it's even a more strict container. For some people, they've like, okay, we're just gonna have the little moderate version. But even this moderate version, that they're talking about, what are most people feeling like when they're in this mentality? So growing up in this paradigm, what happens is if you start questioning it, for some people, they really can't because it feels like the ground beneath their feet is going to like, go away. And they're like, well, hold on, that I'm like floating in limbo. I don't know what to do then. In fact, this did happen with one of my close friends that we were discussing, and she's like, well, and I had to come up with the questions like, why are you saying that? Like, what happens if you leave Islam? Are you going to forget how to eat, how to live your life? Like, are you going to forget how to be a mom and like, just like how you're conducting your life? And she did say, yeah, actually, I wouldn't know what to do. Islam tells me to like, eat with my right hand, put your right hand first, like what dua to say when I enter the bathroom. So you see how like enmeshed, and it was like completely like a rigid, like she didn't know what she was going to do if she didn't have Islam. And it's kind of a funny thought because what it seems like is that outside of Islam, people really don't know what their life is going to be like. I'm just like floating in limbo. Islam is like a very big tribe, okay? This whole tribal mentality is like that. I don't know where I'm going to belong. I don't know what I am, because it did come from a very tribal mentality. This whole concept of actual Islam that came was a very tribal mentality religion. It was for this really regional group in an Arab peninsula for a very specific time. I mean, I think for them, they thought like end of time was probably Muhammad's life in a couple years more. That's what they thought. They thought the whole world was basically the Arab peninsula. They didn't really think, this is kind of what it seems. They didn't think it was going to go outside of that. So their whole, what they're talking about, it's all for all time, for all place. That probably was that little piece of that era, or that, that zone, that whole Arab speaking peninsula. So when they have this whole structure that is getting wobbly, they can't seem to, that rigidity is too hard. For what I would like to say for Muslims is that it's important to have these questions and bring it up, because what it does is, at least it's a hardcore rigidity that you're living your life on, or you're basing your decisions and your kid's life, your whole career, everything is very based on this rigidity, right? And once you have something that is like, hold on, maybe it's not as correct as you're thinking, so now you have this room and space to like sort of let go. This rigidity is not so gripping anymore. It's not so closed off. It's not like, oh my God, no way. You have that little that room to breathe, to think, to actually put your logic and your intuition into it, which has been denied for so long. I think that's what the first thing that Muslims do is like, hang on, I can finally use my logic and intuition. And now I'm trying to make sense of things that weren't making sense before. So this is a big relief for a lot of people. At the same time, they're also a little shaky, like, then what else is there? What am I following? And I want to tell you that it doesn't have to be like that. Where you were like this, now you're like this. You want to take some space and breathe and think. Just like how you're trying to get comfort from the good verses of the Quran, which I want to also like clarify is that that happened to me as well a couple of years ago when I was going through this phase. When I had this questioning and it was a little scary, what do? You turn to like, let me just get a dose, let me read some Quran, let me, go back to the good verses that actually did comfort me or did help me. So you can go and read that. And I want to tell you that a lot of that verses and that good positive experience you're feeling is a lot of it is your energy, actually. And all of it is your understanding, your input into it. So you're making this relationship with it. And you've put in so much. That's why it's giving you so much comfort. You could literally do these same things with any positive or any like good, positive, affirming verses, whether it's from the Bible, whether it's from any book, like any mystic, any spiritual book that gives you positive verses, that gives you like feeling of like expansion, of happiness, gives you that same thing. You will have that relationship even with Rumi, with any book. So this is what I wanted to tell you, that yes, just because you are not making, it's not making sense, there's a lot of loopholes, doesn't mean you have to outright reject and give up all the good stuff that you, or the good relations that you do have. For a lot of people, what ends up happening is now that rigid structure slowly becomes a little expansive. Now it's not so rigid. Now when you hear all these crazy things happening, or you hear like fundamentalist people doing things, or people even who are not fundamentalists, but they're saying things that you cannot back up, you can't agree to, you are more open and free to say like, I don't agree with this. This is nonsense. This is BS. And before you couldn't even say that because you're like, God said that. But now you have this, this freedom to say that, who knows? Was it God? Was it his interpretation? Was this Muhammad's tribal mentality? Was this the rewritten sources afterwards? Was it 100 years of fiqh that came and all these people who wrote the stuff? You don't know where this is coming from. Might as well could be everything was a mishmash, and here they're just taking the good stuff, and now you have to take all the bad too, which is clearly not the case anymore. You are absolutely free and able to just use your mind, your intuition, your emotion, your moral compass, and say that this is nonsense. When I was in that stage, there wasn't that many channels. There wasn't representation, actually. That, what happens to people who go through these questioning? How do they expand? What do they do? So this is what I did. I wouldn't just take it all cut off, or like go and alienate, or like I don't believe this, I don't believe it. You don't need to do all that. It's really for you. Now you have this comfort, this freedom to say that, hold on, at least internally, I'm not feeling rigid. I'm not feeling very scared, very constricted. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling bad because I'm not the perfect Muslim. I can't believe this, but I don't know, but everyone else is going to hell. You don't need to do all that. So that's like a big sigh of relief, a big freedom from this mental harassment that's constantly like happening in most Muslims' heads. It's like one big tribal mentality. It's even your Muslim brothers and sisters. That's what you call them, your Muslim brothers and sisters. You have this forced kinship with them, and it can give you a sense of community, whatever. But if you, like from my previous videos, as I mentioned, that the real true Arab is the one who is from the Arab Peninsula, from those Arab speaking, who was born a Muslim, and that's really for them. Everybody else is just like in the outer circles, and you will always be that way. This forced kinship that they have for Muslim brothers and everything is a very tribal mentality, if you look at it, actually, because that's where it came from. It came from a very tribal mental space. Muhammad was from that thing, and who's their God? Angry, just like them, an angry tribal mental God who kind of threw tantrums, actually, who was angry, who was always kind of like at a drop of a hat, like, let's get to fight, pick up your sword, let's fight. Before they were fighting Quraysh, who were, and now they were fighting each other right after Muhammad died. Ali, Aisha, So when you start small and expanding your container, I think that's the bigger step. You at least now are open to other ideas. You feel expanded, you don't feel as restricted. And that's the first step, I think, in moving towards post-Islam. I wanted to say, I know a lot of people, what happens when they're in this questioning, they're like, oh my God, yeah, what do I do? Then they go to like some ISNA convention, they go to some Bayina courses, they need to take in that, that I need to get like that hit or rush of like the good positive Islam. And I want to tell you, like, that Islam, that this new packaged PR version that you're getting is definitely not like what the 7th century Arab Muslims were experiencing. That century Islam is very, very different compared to what you're getting today. Today's Islam is all, they've modernized it. They've like stepped away from all the things that are problematic. They've slowly removed things that are not, that are not fitting in with today's time. I want you to think about what's going to happen in the 20, 30 years Islam version. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to have a new, completely more expanded, more, happier, a more modern PR packaged Islam. And you're going to find yourself that you're sitting and you've made all these life decisions. You've restricted yourself in a lot of nonsense, because even the things that are happening today were not acceptable 20, 30 years ago. People still are in that mentality, like, oh, incest is wrong, polygamy, it's still allowed, there's no age. Yes, there's age, there's no age. They don't really have that. They're still in that gray zone. You're going to be sitting there thinking, I made all these restrictions, hijab, okay, yes, maybe, but like today's time, a lot of scholars are saying like it's not mandatory, but that's not what it was 20, 30 years ago. So you could be sitting here making all these difficult decisions, these restrictive things in your head that you're like, oh my God, no, that's what the true Islam is. That's what everyone's saying, this. And you're going to find out 20, 30 years later that, hold on, now this is the new Islam. I was just sitting there beating up myself for like no reason. I struggled and made all my life harder and constricted for no reason. So think about that. What kind of Islam is going to be there in 20, 30 years, which they will eventually say, oh, now these are the real interpretation. This is what actually the verse means. These are the, new understandings. This is what we've decided. But you can't think of anything. You can't decide anything, God is only in Islam, in the small, regional, completely uneducated, like God decided, like for all eternity times, is going to go there, but he's never going to give knowledge to anybody else. Think about how limited and how tiny this God is. How tantrumy is this God? So do you want to believe in that paradigm? I'm thinking of making a series actually in the future about what is God post-Islam, because that's a very interesting discussion. I think most Muslims have okay, so there are loopholes. Like, how do I move next? What's after this? And let me know in the comments. I'm actually interested to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what your thoughts are. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.